first, I would like to say happy 4th of July to everyone. And on that note, Larry, we're going to discuss the No Kings protests, as well as dark money funding chaos and some not so peaceful protests.
Yes.
But first, welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host, Joy Votrobek. And back with me is Larry Sanford, our senior analyst.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Larry.
Nice to be here.
And Larry recently wrote a paper on this subject titled Chaos Funding. You can find that on our website at www.ascf.us. I am excited to let you know we are launching a new website, so that should be up today or tomorrow. So if you're having a little trouble finding his paper, bear with us. While you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter and consider donating to the ASCF. Larry, could you first explain from your paper dark money and then the networks of Arabella advisors?
Before I do that, Joy, I'd like to just say that we're talking about the funding, dark money, to create chaos. I mean, the riots in LA against the immigration authorities, ICE, and the riots following in cities up in the Northwest, Portland and so forth, are not spontaneous. They're funded by groups dedicated to basically transforming American society with its free markets, free enterprise, freedoms of speech and so forth, into socialist, communist totalitarianism. And so when all of a sudden ICE raids a Mexican cartel money laundering operation in LA, within hours, rioters appeared in protest, funded with signs, face masks, and all other paraphernalia, creating havoc. And obviously it was not spontaneous. The signs were pre-printed, the equipment was predisposed, and who's paying for all of this? And that's where we get to the dark money. And the dark money is basically money that comes in from various organizations and individuals to transform America, but they don't want to have their handprint on the money, so they have them flow through organizations like Arabella, Act Blue, sources of money that you can't see readily to the public. And a good example is the riots in LA. There's an organization called the Indivisible Project. Now, this project organization was founded in 2016 after the election of Donald Trump as president. And it was founded by two Carleton College graduates who are now married. And they started the group basically opposed to Trump. And they had worked in the congressional office. One of them, the gal, her name is Leah Greenberg, and her husband now is Ezra Levin. And she worked for a congressman who subsequently became director of a George Soros operation. And so this indivisible project.
And George Soros operations are called Open Society,
correct? Is one of them.
One of them.
So he was a director of Open Society. And so they have had access to Soros. And Soros works a lot in conjunction with the Swiss billionaire whose name is Hans-Jörg Wyss, W-Y-S-S. And they fund a lot of socialist programs to fundamentally transform America. So they're big in abortions, other areas of things that one doesn't really consider promoting Western civilization, but more in line with totalitarian role. And we've all heard of George Soros. Books have been written about him, so I'm not going to go down that road too much. But the point of the paper was these spontaneous riots are funded by dark money. And the dark money is basically to transform America. And so they're not spontaneous, they're organized, they're dedicated. And one of the things that puzzles me about these riots is that the police don't participate and go after the ringleaders. You can have a group of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. They're mostly going to be peaceful protesters. I'm all in favor of it. But all it takes is a very small percentage of agitators, professional agitators. And this indivisible project goes by a 3.5% rule. And it's sort of the communist rule. That's, communism never really has won by the majority of the people. They've won by a very dedicated small core of people. And their position is that 3.5% of the population, if dedicated and persistent, can fundamentally transform society. And I agree. All it takes is a small percentage. And so to me, the thing that puzzles me is, knowing this, why don't the authorities go after these 3.5%ers to stop these protests? And Antifa is a perfect example. I mean, they run amok, particularly up in the Northwest, Seattle, Portland, burning down, creating millions and millions of dollars. And the authorities sort of stand by and don't do anything about them. I have yet to see where an Antifa person was made the headlines and was prosecuted.
I haven't yet either. And I know we've talked about this in the past and talked about Act Blue in the past. Yeah. And to your point there, I think just lately with these riots, we are seeing the president call in the National Guard. Yep. And then Governor Newsom making a big deal out of this. So is that part of the problem?
Well, the police are outnumbered, and I never understood why in LA they didn't call in the police departments from all the surrounding communities to quell the riots. You can't just have a few policemen. You could have overwhelming force to take care of these agitators. And chaos leads to breakdown in society. And a breakdown in society leads to change in government.
Which is what they want, right?
Well, they want peace. And so we have the George Soros crowd. We also have Chinese Communist Party. We never can forget. They are everywhere, and their objective is world domination at the expense of American society. And so we have Chinese money coming through a man who was an American citizen, who sold his software company for $800 million, who now lives in Shanghai with his beautiful wife, Jody Evers, and Jody Evans. And she's the co-founder of Code Pink.
Oh, good, because I wanted to get to that. Okay. I know if you could talk more about Code Pink, we'll get there. But I wanted to say, first of all, I agree with you. On the surface, these No Kings protests that we've seen on June 14th, I believe they're going to have some more, possibly on the 4th, maybe after that. It looks like, from what I saw, most of them seemed like they were peaceful protests, patriotic Americans, veterans out there, probably very concerned about America and
issues,
not happy with the president.
Yeah.
And they have every right to do so.
Yeah.
But then not on the surface, I've also seen, and I know the No Kings was part of the anti-ICE issue as well, but you see a lot of those signs, as well as the pro-Palestinian flags, and also Code Pink's no war with Iran and so forth. So could you go more into Code Pink?
Well, Code Pink was originally, a woman's right to her body, et cetera, et cetera. And then Jody Evans married Roy Singham, the gentleman I was just talking about, who was worth at one time at least $800 million. And he's a communist. He always was a communist. He's of Indian heritage, but American citizen. And his parents were communists. So usually the acorn doesn't fall too far from the tree. And so his employees, when he had the company in America, it was a software company, used to joke that he was a Marxist. And so he moved to Shanghai. He's a big fan of communist China. And Jody one time was asked on YouTube whether there was anything wrong, she could think of anything wrong with communist China. And she says, no, I think it's just perfect.
And I found that a very interesting thing in your paper.
So I guess she hasn't looked at the Tibetans or the Uyghurs or the one-child policy where tens of millions of Chinese women were forced abortions and child taken away. So,
but she was for that initially, or not. I would not say for that, but for abortion or women's rights here in America.
Precisely.
So how have things changed?
I know. So it's things happen, and you just have to shake your head. And so the Communist Party is out there, again, to create chaos because it destabilizes the society. And the Chinese play the long game, and they're following the playbook of a Chinese philosopher 5,000 years ago called Sun Tzu. And he said basically the best way to win a war is never to fight it. Take it down from within. And the Chinese are making every effort to do that. I'm a big fan of reciprocity, and I think that we should reciprocity with China as far as trying to subvert their society from within. Well, anyhow.
Well, that's a good point you bring up, though, is so people might say, well, what's China got to do with all this No Kings protests and the riots downtown? You see the pro-Palestinian flags and anti-ICE. But what you said earlier, when ICE raids a drug cartel, a Mexican drug cartel, and all of a sudden you have these riots.
Right.
So China's providing the drug cartels with the fentanyl products.
Right.
So they do have a big stake in this game.
Yeah. And of course, the money laundering, there's so much money generated from the sale of fentanyl originating in China. They have to launder the money through, and that's a whole subject unto itself on how they launder money. So the Chinese have a vested interest in money laundering and criminal organizations. There's been books written about how China, the CCP, is the largest crime organization in the world by far. Not only just drugs and so forth, but other stuff too. So, and then last but not least, the United States and Western civilization is under attack from Islamists. So you mentioned the Palestinian flags and the Mexican flags, but the Palestinian flags, and then they end up burning the American flags. The Islamists, like the Chinese communists, want to dominate the world, and the way to dominate the world is you have to take out America. And so when you hear people saying they're for Palestine, death to Israel, they're really saying death to America. And it's not a coincidence that American flags are burnt at all these rallies. It's basically an anti-American rally. So you got all these forces coming up against America, so we just got to recognize the issue, recognize who the enemy is, and act accordingly. And I just saw recently that the feds in Oregon arrested a couple of Antifa people, not the local government, but the feds. And the feds had the authority to do it because they were attacking a federal building. So if they attack a state building, Antifa can get away with it. But if they attack a Fed building, the feds are saying you can't do it. So at least it's a beginning.
Well, you answered my question. Do you believe the U.S. government is properly dealing with the agitators? And I guess in some cases it can, in some cases...
Yeah. There's a new sheriff in town. It's going to take a while. But the state of California and Oregon, for example, they're riddled with useful idiots is the only term I can think of. And the communists love it. Chairman Mao used to say the society, this is during the Civil War, against the Chinese nationalists, and they say the universe is in utter chaos. The situation is excellent. The communists love chaos.
So our peace through strength.
Yes.
I talked about this before. I think when we were talking about vigilance as one of our peace through strength core strategies, and we discussed we need to continue following the money, which you have done in this paper very well, and the truth behind who is funding this chaos.
Yeah, and prosecute. And remember that 3.5%. Yes. All you need to grab it, well, of course, 3.5% of American population would be like 10 million people, but you don't need 10 million people. You just go after the leaders, and it will make it a lot easier for these things to be put in control. But you can identify the problem. Yeah.
And then, as we discussed, peaceful protest is not the issue, but those that are going beyond this, where it becomes rioting and burning, and that they are the ones that need to be addressed. And
if you're a foreigner here in the States, if you don't have a U.S. citizenship and you're involved in a violent riot, to me, see ya. We don't need you here. So that, again, 3.5%. I mean, you have places like Columbia University with a significant percentage of the population. Harvard, I think the graduate school of government has 50% foreigners. And you have the significant percentage of students who are foreigners. All it takes is 3.5% of them to create chaos.
Well, thank you for that brief, Larry, and thank you for your paper. And to our listeners, please subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts. You can find us on YouTube and our Rumble channels. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Substack. Listen to our audio podcast on your favorite Apple or Android devices. And join us again next time for our Peace Through Strength podcast.